Tom, I've got to give some credit to one of our chapter presidents.
Yeah.
One of our guardians we've known longer than most, and just one of our overall better people in our lives, one of my favorite people in our lives. He started his chapter meeting this month by showing a YouTube clip.
Right.
And I don't even want to give this a little setup. Some people might have seen this before. It's been sort of this on and off viral thing for the last year or two. Some people have seen it a lot. I've seen it repeatedly. It's kind of made its circles back to me. It's so funny.
Is it the talking dog where the guy says, I went to the refrigerator and got some meat, and right? Have you seen this?
I haven't seen
and
that
the talking
one.
dog goes, yeah, what was in there? You haven't seen this?
No.
Okay. Well,
you'll have to send me that.
We'll get to that.
You get all the dog.
Okay.
You get all the dog
Yeah.
ones, and it's not a cat playing the piano.
Yeah.
This is applicable to today's topic of taxes.
Oh, goodness.
It's this month's topic of taxes and everything going on in Congress right now. So I'm going to ask that we take a break real quick.
Yeah.
And let's play that video.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Where's all your money gone, Donnie?
Taxes. 6, 9, 10, 11. Let me fix my houses.
Bug, it's okay. It's part of the game.
No, it's not.
It
It's
is.
not fun.
It's not fun to what?
It's the worst part of the game.
Oh, it's what?
Taxes.
Dave, that kid is crying for a really good reason. Paying taxes sucks, and he gets it.
Every kid should learn how to play Monopoly at a young age. Every kid should learn how to play Monopoly.
It's been so long since I've played. I mean, I was a little kid last time I played Monopoly. I don't remember. Are there taxes in the game, or was that just like his parents imposing that rule on him?
Oh no! So there's two things. There's two ways you pay taxes. One is on like the chance or community chest cards.
Yeah.
You can draw and it says you owe $100 in taxes.
Okay, all right.
And you have to pay it to the bank. And different people play different ways. And I don't know what the official rules are. Some say you put it in the middle, and when you land on free parking, you get it. Some say it just goes back into the treasury,
right,
so to speak. The other way is, when you land on somebody else's property, technically in the game, they call that a tax.
I see.
So if they have houses, if they have hotels,
right,
you have to do that. And there's different ways to play. There's also, you can mortgage your properties, right? When you're short on cash, you can do a mortgage. And when you mortgage your properties, you have to pay on those. It's very lifelike in that way. Unfortunately, right now, we have a Congress getting together, and we've been talking about this the last few weeks, that thinks they're playing with Monopoly money. In fact, I don't think there's enough money in the game of Monopoly to match the amount of spending they want to do in Congress right now.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. I'm inclined to think, I'm pretty confident, because I know some people, I know some families who take Monopoly really seriously.
Yeah.
When they get together for like holidays and things, they play Monopoly. And I bet there are people out there playing the game of Monopoly who are more serious about the Monopoly money than current Democrats in Congress are about spending real money, other people's real money.
Well, if they're not careful, sooner than later, dollar bills and Monopoly bills are going to be worth the same thing.
That's right, which is nothing.
The cost of the paper they're made on.
So here we are. I mean, look, the United States government today is controlled by progressives, certainly the elected branches. We have a progressive Democrat as president, and progressive Democrats control both chambers of Congress, which means they really can do anything that they want to do. I keep hearing little news stories about various Democrats complaining about Republicans, but Republicans are basically irrelevant at this point. They don't need any Republican to cast a vote for anything. They have majorities in Democrats have majorities in both chambers. The reason that you hear these things, you'll hear Nancy Pelosi and others coming out complaining that they can't get Republican support because they don't want to take all the blame. That's really what it boils down to. They want some Republicans to join them so that when things go south, they can say, well, this was a bipartisan measure, including raising the debt ceiling and all of that.
And anybody wants to see proof of that, go back to Joe Biden's speech on Monday, where he said, we are facing economic disaster if we don't raise the debt ceiling.
Right.
And Republicans are holding this up. And the Republicans are sitting around saying, you have majority of both houses of Congress and the presidency.
Right. Do whatever you want to do.
If you want to do it, go do it. We're going to fight you on it.
Yep. This is a little aside, and then I want to make a bigger point. I was out in California when there was an initiative on the ballot prior to this initiative for the state legislature in California to pass the budget, which is in a way the most important thing a state legislature does, because it's saying, here's our agenda, here's what we're going to do, and here's how much money we're going to spend on it. So passing the budget is a big deal.
Presuming they stay in budget.
Presuming they stay here. Anyway, prior budgets had always been passed by a simple majority. That's all it required. And an initiative was on the ballot to raise that majority within the state legislature. I don't remember if it was 55% or 60%, but the point is a supermajority. And a number of conservative Republicans were on board. They liked this. They actually thought this would be a good thing, that it would slow things. It'd make it harder to pass bad budgets. And I came out publicly opposed to this initiative. I said, no. Let's keep it at a simple majority so that whoever controls the two chambers of the state legislature, if they have a majority, they should pass whatever budget they want to pass. And if it's really wise and good and responsible and fiscally limited, they deserve credit and applause. And if it's disastrous, I want to be really clear who to blame, who's actually responsible. What happened is, as that supermajority was placed on the legislature, the Democrats, who control everything in California, they would come up with these ridiculous, outrageously expensive budgets, spending on all kinds of wasteful, counterproductive things. And then they would add to it a few special things that a handful of Republicans wanted to get those handful of Republicans to vote in support. And then they could go around and actually say this was a bipartisan budget, when the truth is it was a Democratic budget with a few extra items added that made it even more expensive so that they could peel off and get a few Republicans voting in support.
Sounds familiar to D.C. today.
Very much. That's what's happening right now. And so here was my bigger point, right? We have progressive Democrats in control of everything. And you and I have talked many times on this podcast. Our listeners, I think, probably know better than any group of people in the United States what progressivism is, what the progressive idea is. That it's all about central planning, scientific experts in government really controlling our lives, and that this idea has a long history. It stretches all the way back 150 years. And so here we are in 2021, and I keep waiting for progressives to offer something new, something different. And what's going on? What's the big discussion? They want to spend more money and take more money. They want to raise our taxes and spend more of other people's money, spend us more into debt.
Right.
And I'm thinking this is what progressives were offering a decade ago, 3 decades ago, 8 decades ago. It's the exact same story over and over and over. There's not much progress to progressivism. How's that?
It's interesting. We talked about that. It must have been 6 months ago, 7 months ago.
Yeah.
We talked about how there was a point in time where progressivism was still relatively young.
Right.
Right. You had
Right.
just the academic side of progressivism, and then you had just the Woodrow Wilson era, and then you had the FDR era.
Yep.
And they were still in a position where they could say, well, we just haven't had enough time yet.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Now you've had
150
years.
Well, in fact,
at least 100 or 80 to 100 years of in practice.
That's right.
This has been going on for 80 to 100 years of we have been trying to tax you more and spend our way to a better life. And you've pointed it out several times. All of the bad, negative social pathologies have skyrocketed in this country, despite more spending, bigger government, more control over our lives, taking more of our property, taking more of our income, everything else.
This is a generalization, but I would defend it. If you look at all of American history, I would argue the American regime, as a regime, you could divide it into 2 stages. There was a time when the American regime was a constitutional republic, and there's a period where the American regime is a progressive administrative state. And it's been a progressive administrative state longer than it ever was a constitutional republic. And so anything bad going on today, it's hard with any honesty to say that some problem is because our government is too limited by the Constitution, that we have too much of a limited constitutional republic. We need more progressivism. It's been a progressive administrative state now longer than it ever actually was a constitutional republic. And yet here we are, and the conversation is they need to spend more. They need to raise the debt ceiling. You and I use the example. That's like someone who has runaway credit card debt, the spender, the person in debt, being in control of how much their credit card limit is. And they just keep raising the limit, raising the limit, raising the limit. There's no hint. There is not a hint in Congress right now of any part of government scaling back any kind of spending. That's not even mentioned.
And let's be clear about something. There's no constitutional law. This holdup on the debt ceiling, this need to pass a higher debt ceiling, it's not like the Constitution said, well, here's your debt ceiling and you can't go over this. And they're trying to – this is a law that they created.
That's right.
And now they're trying to raise it. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. You're the constitutional expert. But I don't think that there is we did not grant our federal government in the Constitution the power to take on debt.
That's right.
To pay for people's lives and needs.
Nope, it's nowhere in there. This is something Congress has invented, and therefore Congress has total control, which is both terrifying, but it also allows us as citizens to pin the responsibility for these things, and we can pin responsibility for the growing debt and everything that debt means, which includes the terrible inflation that we see signs of it happening already, and it's going to get worse because as the debt grows, that usually corresponds with the printing of more money. That's a big part of the debt. Congress issues bonds, and then the Federal Reserve buys it, and when they buy it, they print money. That's how they actually buy it.
Because they don't produce anything.
That's right. And so we get more money circulating, which means for our listeners, the money that you have in your checking account, savings account, whatever it is, all of a sudden becomes less value. You have less purchasing power with those dollars than you used to have. It's a kind of theft. And their latest thing now, they want to go after corporate taxes. This is part of, and it's not limited to corporate taxes, but that's kind of a big centerpiece because one of the great successes, there have not been many successes to the progressive movement, but I will give it credit for this. It has been very successful really over the last 8 decades at demonizing the idea of corporations, the idea of businesses. And we should be really clear, but a corporation is nothing but a business, and a business is nothing more than some people, one or more people, trying to be productive and produce something that they think other people want and need. And very often businesses fail because either they misread, they're producing something people really don't value much, or they're producing something in ways that's really inefficient. Someone else maybe is more efficient at producing those things. They fail for all kinds of different reasons, but they're trying. That's the whole idea of a bit. They're trying to provide some value for other people, and progressivism has turned that word corporation and the related word business into bad things, shameful things. It's in progressive circles today. You would get a worse reaction by using the word corporation or business in a positive sense. You'd get a worse reaction than just throwing around the F word.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. Well, first of all, you did miss one reason that businesses fail. Yeah. You were talking about maybe they didn't create the right product, or somebody created it better. They also might have forgotten to pay the right official.
Well, that's true.
To bribe the right official or get the right legislation passed that helps them.
Yep.
And obviously that's a thing that we shouldn't forget about.
That's absolutely right.
The bigger issue here, and I think we should go back through sort of the history of corporate taxes a little bit, but there is this issue of if somebody is trying to be productive, if somebody is trying to offer something, it's really simple. Either other people value it and they want to pay them for it, or they don't. And the government has just gotten in the way of that from day one. From day one of progressivism, they've gotten in the way of, we were discussing earlier, the very first income tax very first corporate tax
Right.
was struck down by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And when I say it started with day one of progressivism,
Mm-hmm.
the corporate tax came back in 1913.
That's right.
Who was inaugurated as president in 1913?
Woodrow Wilson.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
So we have had a corporate tax since day one of or year one of
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson's
Yep.
time in office, and it's existed ever since.
All the way through, more than a century. Real brief little history here. In the early days, if you go all the way back to the American founding, there were no corporate taxes because there were no corporations. The very idea of a legal corporation, a corporate entity, that had to be invented. And this is one of the things Alexander Hamilton actually contributes much to this, thinking through what that means to form some kind of limited liability corporation, a corporate entity that limits the liability of the people who start it and own it. It didn't exist at the time of the founding. Basically, every business was some form of either a sole proprietorship, like a farmer typically, right? He owns some farmland, he builds a little house on it, he cultivates some crops. He's a sole proprietor, or a partnership of some form. But in either way, whatever income was earned was viewed as personal income.
Mm-hmm.
So there were no corporations to be taxed until you get into the 19th century. And that's why you don't get the first corporate tax till the late 1890, mid-1890s, 94, I believe. And that's the one that's very quickly struck down by the court, and then it returns in 1913.
So one of our goals on the podcast is to help people to think through problems and scenarios like the founders did.
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to do that. And let's talk about why creating those limited liability entities is important from a philosophical standpoint.
Sure.
From a philosophical standpoint, one of the objectives, at least from my perspective, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal was to encourage people to want to be productive, to encourage people to want to try to create new things, experiment, be innovative, be entrepreneurial.
And that includes being willing to take some risk, right? Because all those things you're talking about, that's risky stuff.
Exactly. So there's two forms of risk there, though. There's the risk to the entrepreneur of, well, what if nobody values what I'm trying to create, which is a risk for anybody, and you have to face that.
Yep.
But there's also the risk of we're not perfect beings, right? The founders understood we're human. I always like to go back to that spectrum from Aristotle of you have gods and you have beasts, and we're humans in the middle.
Right.
We're not perfect. We make mistakes. When you make a mistake, people can get harmed.
Yeah.
It's not always perfect. Whether it's Henry Ford and the assembly line and a belt is moving too fast and somebody loses a finger, or a chain breaks because the human who made the chain built it wrong or assembled it wrong, things happen. And if you're going to get in trouble, and if you're going to lose your home, and your family's not going to be able to eat, and you're going to go to jail, and all of these bad things that could happen because you accidentally harmed somebody, they're disincentives to actually participating in a productive society.
That's right.
So when you talk about thinking like the founders wanted to promote the idea of productive people. And so you start looking at, Madison starts looking at things like
Hamilton.
Hamilton starts looking at things like creating entities that limit the liability of the individual, where the company might go under. If somebody gets severely harmed, the company might go under, but that person's not going to lose their house. They're not going to be sleeping on the street. Their family's not going to die because their business harmed somebody.
Right. If it was accidental, right? And let's be real clear. If that business owner purposefully tried to hurt people, well, there are criminal laws to deal with that. Then, then you charge him with murder, or what? There's a whole body of criminal. If someone is purposely trying to hurt someone, that's that we're in the criminal realm there. What the limited liability speaks to is the accidental. What happens if you're trying to run a business and a mistake is made and somebody gets harmed some way, should that totally destroy the lives of everyone involved? When I think of business and I think of corporations, I have in my mind this image. I want to share this with our listeners. I encourage our listeners to just imagine going back to, prehistoric times, some kind of state of nature where early primitive human beings, I think you've memorized Hobbes' account of the state of nature. It was dull and nasty.
Life in the state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
That's it, right? And it sounds pretty miserable.
Right.
And it's pretty true. When you go back and look at how people were living, say, 10,000 years ago, this is before writing was even invented, before alphabets were invented. And imagine a group of people, I don't know, in a cave or something like that. They have no confidence where they're going to get their food the next day. They're not quite sure how to stay warm when the weather gets cold or how to cool off when the weather gets hot. They don't have any technology to protect themselves against diseases and illnesses and things like this. Life is really difficult. Those people that I'm describing, they are living in a condition of true poverty. Miserable poverty.
Take it a step further. I always find that line from Hobbes, the very first word, after life in the state of nature is,
right.
The very first word is often overlooked, and it's really, really important. He says it's solitary.
Yeah.
Why? Because you have nobody protecting you and your property. There is no government, that even a restricted government with its proper purpose,
right.
There is nobody there protecting your private property and your life.
Right.
And when somebody's hungry and when somebody's cold and they're dying and you have maybe a bearskin blanket and you might have a little bit of food or you are food, you don't get together in a group sometimes. Sometimes I'm going to be in a cave by myself and I'm going to put up boulders in place and I'm going to protect myself, and life is solitary.
It's a great point. One of the, we today in a modern civil society sort of just take for granted the idea that we make friends with whomever we want to make friends with. We meet people and we choose, I like this person or I don't like that person, but that's because we feel so safe. We feel so safe interacting with other people. In something like a state of nature or very early primitive human cultures, the other human being you see in the forest, is that a friend or an enemy? Do they want to come hang out with you or do they want to eat you?
Right.
And the answer, you don't know for sure.
Right.
And so you just have to kind of assume they're all potential enemies. And so even the idea of friendship is really difficult in this state of miserable squalor and poverty and really an absence of anything we would call wealth or value. And then I want our listeners to imagine these poor people, they're probably stinky because they don't take baths. Whatever they have for clothes, they wear until they disintegrate. And as they're disintegrating, they find something else to wrap around themselves. These kinds of people, now imagine 2 or 3 or 4 stand up and say, hey, we have an idea. We think we can produce something that the rest of you want. Maybe it's shelter, maybe it's housing, or they figure out a way, they think they can maybe cultivate some food, a reliable source of food, or anything like that people value. The basic question is, should we appreciate what those people are offering to do, or should we look at them as our new enemy and say, how dare you? If you build houses, some among us aren't going to get a house, or some of those houses are going to be nicer than other houses. There's going to be inequality of housing. What's the word today? Equity. There won't be equity among homeowners.
Inequity, yes.
Right? Progressivism views those few who stand up and say, we want to be productive. We have an idea, and we think we can work together and produce things that the rest of you value more efficiently than you can on your own. And by the way, if the rest of you produce something, we'll be willing to trade, right? I look at that and I think, God bless those people. That's wonderful that they're actually willing to get off their butt and use their minds, use their hands, use their energy and talents and go do something productive.
Right.
And yet the progressive view is they're bad, especially if they're successful. If they're successful, if people actually like what they produce and buy a lot of it, then they become public enemy number one. And those corporations and those businesses, the line progressives love to use is, they're just in it for profit. And they spit that word out, profit, with dripping with contempt, right? That is the most despicable thing in the world imaginable, to actually do something productive out of the desire to earn a profit.
You go back to that image of the cave. Mm-hmm. You talked about different people providing different things in trading. You could trade security just as easily. Mm-hmm. If that one person knows how to make a spear and is willing to go out and kill the woolly mammoth.
Yeah.
If I'm 10 other people and that person's willing to do that, I'm protecting them all night. Mm-hmm. We're taking turns staying up all night. Right. We are protecting that person because that one woolly mammoth feeds us all for a month.
Right.
And then somebody comes along and knows how to create fire. And so you're going to protect them too. And but that's how society comes about. Mm-hmm. Right? That's how civil nature or civil society comes to being.
That's how real material progress. And here we should be clear, there is such a thing as there's material progress, there's technological progress, there are advances in the conditions of human life. There's medical advances, there's advances in architecture and figuring out how to build better houses and growing food and all these things. How does any of that come to be? The modern world today, the modern Western world, the modern progressive world, in a way, we're a bunch of spoiled brats. We take all that for granted. We just assume there should be a nice, safe house for me to live in, and my food should be nutritious and tasty, and my car should be safe to drive, and without ever thinking, how does this stuff come to be?
Imagine being the guy in the cave who turns to the people who are protecting everybody and says, guys, I know you've got your fire. We're cooking food. Nobody's getting as sick from the food anymore. I want to be the guy who makes the food taste better. Will you give me a year?
Yeah.
Take care of me, feed me. I'm not going to do anything, but I'm going to focus on learning how to make our food taste better. That's a sales job.
Right,
You've got to
absolutely.
convince these
You
people.
bet.
I can't promise that I'm going to be able to do it.
That's right.
But man, those rats we're eating, those are disgusting.
Yeah.
I hate the way those taste. I'm going to go discover something. I'm going to go explore. And that's all part of how this whole thing works.
It absolutely is. And when you really understand the rise of human productivity and the entrepreneurship and the real risk that it often involves, it changes the way you think about it. You start to become more appreciative of these things. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the great things we can do as an organization, the Vino Veritas Society, is to push back against the progressive narrative that business is bad, that corporations are bad, that trying to earn a profit by creating value for others, that this is bad. And actually, we should start showing appreciation down to the level of employees within a business. Get to know a little bit about the business owner, because the chances are high. If you're an employee at a business, chances are high the business owner very likely has risked much, probably has failed before, has probably failed in a great, spectacular way, right? And yet kept at it and kept trying to make things work and is now running this business successfully. The business owner isn't your enemy if you're the employee. It's not your enemy. The employee and the business owner have some really common ground there. It's a partnership in trying to create value for others. That's good for the business owner, and it's ultimately good for the employee. Mm-hmm. Either the employee will get promotions and pay raises within that business, or other business owners will say, look at that employee over there. That employee's really talented. We want that guy or that gal at our business.
I was going to make that same analogy, but when you said that, it made me think about, do you remember the book and the movie Moneyball?
Yes.
I mean, we're both baseball guys.
Yeah, sure.
Right? The guy from Moneyball was working for the Orioles. I think it was the Orioles.
No, the Oakland A's.
No, before the A's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
And Billy Beane walked into the office.
Yes.
And this guy gets in front of Billy Beane and says, I can fix your problem. Mm-hmm. If you'll let me come over, I can fix your problem. And he quits his job and he goes and he works for the A's, and all of a sudden he does it. And he does it so well. You know where he works now? The Cleveland Browns football team.
I didn't know that.
The Cleveland Browns,
Interesting.
it's been so long since
Yeah.
they've won a championship
Yeah.
that they said, well, if he could do it for baseball, let's see if he can do it in football too.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
And that's what happens when you create. And I was thinking about the same kind of analogy. I wanted to go back to the cave yet again.
Right.
I'm going to take a step back because one of the big differences between the classical thought, the American, the idea of the American founding, and progressivism is that progressivism says that human nature changes.
Yes.
I'm going to prove right now a scenario human nature doesn't change. If you're the guy in the cave and you're sitting there saying, I think I know how to make food taste better. I found this stuff that's salt. And when you put salt on food, it actually makes it taste better. And I go into my little group of people and I say, hey guys, I need a year. I'm going to make our food taste better. And they all look at me and say, no, your job is to go clean the poop stalls.
Right.
That's what you have to do.
Right.
And I'm set. If I say, no, I know I can make food taste better, you're going to go find another cave.
Yeah.
You're going to up and leave, and you're going to go find another cave, and you're going to walk into that cave, and you're going to say to them, hey, guys, I came from that cave over there.
Right.
They're not very good thinkers. they don't see the future.
Right.
I can make your food taste better. Some caves might say yes. He might have to go to multiple caves, but eventually he's going to find that cave that says, we want better tasting food, and we've got everybody else we need. Please come in. Human nature that hasn't changed today. So we talked about corporate taxes. As the United States has raised its corporate tax rate, what do people do? They go and they find other countries to base their company out of that says, we value you being here. We value the productivity you create. We value the jobs you create. We value the products you bring us. We would love to have you here. And we have a lower corporate tax rate to get more of you to come here.
So the United States business, the business base starts in the United States and then moves its headquarters to a country with a lower corporate tax, like, I don't know, Ireland or someplace like
There you
that,
go.
right? That's basically the equivalent of the guy walking from cave to cave, looking for someone else who values what he has to offer. It's the same thing.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
And so, when we think about corporate taxes, I'm going to try to connect. I have these two disparate ideas and I think they are connected together. One is this idea that businesses are things that should be taxed. They deserved to be taxed as if they've done something wrong. And we see the same kind of attitude among many business owners who say, I need to give back to the community. So very often businesses will go fund various, tax-exempt charitable organizations and donate to these things, 501c3s and other kinds of groups. It's the same spirit. Both, we got to tax the corporations and I'm a business owner and I want to give back. The premise is that the business has done something bad. Is that the business has somehow harmed someone or taken something? To the business owners who say, I need to give back or I want to give back, I say, stop. Stop talking like that. If you want to give, go ahead and give. I'm not telling you not to give. I'm just saying, stop with the guilty conscience. Get rid of your guilty conscience. You get up every day, you make a choice to get up every day and be productive, to run your business and produce things that other people value. You're producing things they want. You're trading things that you actually create. You're not taking, you're not stealing. There's nothing to be guilty at all. When someone, if you're running a restaurant and someone hands you $5 in exchange for the meal that you just made, that person is saying, I value the meal more than I value the $5 in my pocket. You don't owe that person. You just made a trade that you both agreed to.
Where are you finding meals for $5 in America today? I want to go there.
I bet there are some fast food chains that have some specials that get pretty close. And then with the taxing, right? I've had people, I've done a lot of public speaking and presentations, Dave, and I've had people challenge me in public and say, well, Cranwitter, I bet you believe there should be no corporate taxes at all. And I say, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly right. None. Zero. Because what is it that the business is doing? They're being productive. I want more productivity. I want more houses being built and cars and computers and medicines invented and whatever else it is that people value. I want more of that kind of productive activity. And when someone decides to do more and produce and start a business, I don't think they should be punished. I don't think they should be taxed. I think they should be applauded. And so we should give them awards, not a tax bill.
So this is one of those moments where we should also talk about trickle-down economics.
Okay.
Because this is one of my big pet peeves in the progressive world we live in today.
Yeah.
And that is this generally accepted idea that trickle-down economics doesn't work and it was a failure. And I might have talked about this in past podcasts. I don't remember. I don't think it can be said enough, right? This is one of the major critiques of Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. Ronald Reagan, with Art Laffer by his side, start talking about trickle-down economics.
Yep.
And they say when companies are more successful, when companies make more money, they employ more people, they hire more people, they pay people more. It goes beyond that. And a lot of people they'll cherry pick the statistics. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, well, if you look, that company didn't actually raise wages, so see, trickle-down economics didn't work.
Right.
What about all of the businesses and all of the people who make money servicing the people who now work at that company?
Yep.
So Amazon's the perfect example, and Amazon is this weird conundrum in our progressive world. Jeff Bezos is this huge progressive, and he talks about giving back right there. He's part of this giving pledge that they say when they die, I'm going to give 99% of my wealth to.
Right.
But Amazon won't work with union workers. They won't allow their employees to unionize, and Amazon employment has skyrocketed. The number of people who are working for Amazon around the country and around the world is massive. There are so many new jobs being created, and they build these warehouse centers and they build these other facilities, and you have people who are the drivers. So think about all of these drivers who are delivering all day, every day. How much more gas are they buying? How many more service stations are they frequenting? They're going to restaurants while they're out on their delivery routes instead of cooking at home. When you have a fulfillment center in one place, you see businesses start to sprout up all around that fulfillment center. That's trickle-down economics. When you do get these businesses that are successful, the more people they can hire, the more productive they can be, the more they can produce, the more the rest of the town around it is able to grow as well.
I like to summarize it this way. Productivity incentivizes productivity. When some people are productive, other people are watching. Look at that group over there. Whatever they're making, growing, they're producing something. Others want some of that. They want some of what's being produced. Well, how are others going to get it? I mean, I suppose you could steal. Certainly if you run for Congress, that's the way you think about things. You just steal and take it. But for most of us, Dave, if your business is producing something, and I'm watching you make it, and I'm thinking, I really want one of those things that your business is making. The only option I have to get one of your products and be a good person and be decent about it is to offer to trade.
Right.
Right? Whether it's cash, that's usually the way we do it. I offer to buy it from you, but maybe it's something else that you want and I offer a trade. In either case, I have to be productive. I have to create something that you value and then bring it to you and say, are you willing to trade one of your products for this thing that I made?
Right.
And if we both agree, right, we make the trade and we both walk away happy. You get the thing you want, I get the thing I want. That's the beauty of the business model. It's a win-win. Right. Nobody is stealing from anybody. No one's ripping anybody off. The business owner doesn't owe anybody. He doesn't need to pay back anything because he hasn't stolen anything. Rather, he's been producing and trading with people who want to trade.
So in last week's conversation, in last week's podcast, you talked about Jim and Anthony, your friends Jim and Anthony, who have done all the research and figured out that tax revenue, it always comes out to about 18% GDP, give or
Roughly.
take 17 to 19, somewhere in there.
It's pretty flat.
No matter how much you raise or how much you lower. And a lot of people would sit there and say, well, how is that the case? How can that be possible? Do businesses really produce less? Is Amazon going to produce less if Joe Biden raises his tax rates, the corporate tax rate from 21%, where Donald Trump lowered it to, back to 28, 29, 30%, which is where Biden and the progressive Democrats are looking to get to. There's so many different ways to manipulate what you're paying in taxes. And that's really how it happens. Companies say, okay, I'm willing to pay enough, 18%. That 18%. And outside of that, I'm going to manipulate my way around this. And some just pay people off. We did just have, and I don't want to go down this whole road because I think we don't know enough about it yet, but the Pandora Papers that were published this week.
Just came out,
came out. And I don't know enough about the organization that it's some international consortium of independent journalists who went out and they researched all of the billionaires and more specifically the heads of state and their cabinets who have been hiding billions of dollars in other countries and in accounts in Central America.
You remember that great scene,
like
the old Bogart movie Casablanca, and that famous scene where the police prefect, he's one of the biggest gamblers. There's a casino in the back.
Right.
And he's standing there and he says, I'm shocked to learn that there's gambling going on. And right then someone from the casino comes up and hands him his winnings for the evening because he had been back there gambling.
It's the same scene from The Great Gatsby.
Yes.
There's that scene in The Great Gatsby where Gatsby walks in with I'm forgetting the other character's name, but his character who kind of introduces him. Oh no, it was Gatsby with his friend and neighbor. They walk into the speakeasy in the back, and the governor of New York is sitting in the speakeasy
having a drink,
smoking a cigar. He's got a girl on his lap. I mean, he's doing everything you shouldn't be doing.
I agree. I don't know enough about the veracity of these papers and these reports, but it would in no way shock me at all to find out that a bunch of government officials around the world are hiding money in all kinds of shell companies in other countries where there are much lower taxes and regulations and everything else. Of course.
Knowing that happens, I think it's important when we talk about the guy who goes around to the different caves, the big conversation when Trump lowered the corporate tax rate. And I will forever say this was one of his best accomplishments in his 4 years.
I agree.
I think he would agree with me that the only regret he has about it is that he couldn't get it lower than 21%. But at least 21% falls close to that 18-ish percent where he understands companies are willing to pay. At the time, Ireland, and I think they're back there. I haven't looked at it in the last year or two, but Ireland was at about a 3.5% corporate tax rate. Why does all of this matter? Corporate taxes, when you pay a corporate tax overseas, you either leave your money there, if you bring it home. So if you sell something in China, if you sell something in Europe, if you sell something in South America, you sell it and you pay the corporate tax rate where you sell it. If the money stays there, that's it. You've paid your taxes. If you bring that money home, you pay to the United States. You pay the corporate income tax of now 29%. On everything you sold, you get a deduction for what you paid to the other country. So the United States sits here and says, I don't care where you sell, what you sell, and who you sell it to, but when you sell it, you have to pay Joe Biden is going to say 29.5%, no matter what. So what do all these companies do? All these progressive companies, all these companies who are out there advocating for progressive government. They're out there. They're fighting for Joe Biden. They're fighting for AOC and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
They're putting up memes saying taxes are the price we pay to live in civil society, right? And all those kinds of things.
They're contributions that we pay to live in civil society.
That's right. Taxes are contributions. And those very same progressives who own businesses, what do they do?
Well, they're all going to Ireland. And then they're fighting to advocate for higher taxes here, but they're staying over there. And they're manipulating our elections. I'm talking about Google. I'm talking about Facebook. I'm talking about Twitter. I'm talking about Apple. They all have international headquarters in Ireland.
Yeah.
Right? Because Ireland has the same rules we do. You pay your sales tax in whatever country you sold your product in. And if there's a difference, you pay the difference to Ireland. Well, when it's 3.5%, and in China it's 15%, and that's really important. It's about 15 to 20% in China.
Yeah.
And the United States is 29.5%.
Yep.
What in the world are we thinking that we have a higher corporate tax rate than China?
Well, and that's why Biden was busy earlier this year traveling around the country trying to get other countries, right, to adopt some kind of minimum universal global minimal corporate tax to try to get rid of the Ireland sort of situation, to get everyone to agree to tax and punish corporate entities.
He was asking everybody to require a minimum 15% corporate income tax or corporate sales tax rate.
Let's suppose they're successful. Let's suppose they're able to tax corporations all over the world, and there just is no escaping it. What really happens when you tax a corporation? We have today in the United States somewhere around 100 million fellow citizens who think corporations and businesses are centers of greed and evil and theft. That's what they are. And therefore they deserve to be taxed. They should pay their fair share. That's one of the mottos that progressives trot out all the time. But any economist worth his salt knows that the corporation, the actual corporation, which is meant to shield, it's meant to separate the capital of a business from the individual human beings running the business, owning the business. The actual corporate entity that is the capital required to make the business go, it doesn't pay those taxes. It is a carry-through. Basically, it's broken into thirds, effectively, between consumers. They pay corporate taxes in the form of higher prices.
Right.
Workers pay corporate taxes in the form of lower wages. All of a sudden, the business pays the employee less because it has to send more money to the government.
Or hires fewer employees.
That's right. The point is the business has less disposable money to spend on salaries and wages. And the other third is shareholders tend to earn less in returns on their investment. So think of each of these categories. When you impose any tax, even a low tax, much less a really high tax, on a corporation, you are making life difficult for consumers, workers, and investors. In the case of the consumers, you've just raised prices on consumer products. Who does that hit the hardest? Who is that the hardest for? Poor people. Rich people may not care if the price of bread goes up a little bit or the price of a cell phone goes up. But if you're poor and you don't have a lot of disposable income, that might be a make or break sort of thing. So that part hurts poor people. Now you have workers, employees. These are people, I want our listeners to get their mind around this. The same progressives who say, tax those greedy corporations, tax them because they got to pay their fair share. The result is that those businesses pay their employees less money or, as you pointed out, hire fewer employees. It's bad for employees. Then what do the progressives do? Turn around and say, I want a law that increases the minimum wage. Make those corporations, right, pay those employees more. When the best thing to do is back away.
Right.
Just leave those corporations. Don't try to command what they pay employees. Don't try to take money from them in the form of taxation. All that's bad for employees. And then you get the shareholders. What happens when shareholders start earning less and less on their investments because a business is sending more and more money to taxes? These investors stop investing.
Right.
They stop thinking, I'm not going to invest my capital in a business, in a corporation, because government's going to take a huge chunk of it in the form of taxes. That's bad for innovation. That means a business has less money to expand, less money to invest in research and development, right? To make things more efficiently, to make things better, to improve quality, to lower prices, all of that. So it's just bad all the way around. There's not a good thing. There is not one human good that comes from corporate taxes, except for the political class. They get more revenue coming to them.
In the short term.
In the short term.
In the short term.
That's right.
And I want to use that as to tie a bow on the last three podcasts. You went through some really interesting things over the last few weeks that all of this adds up to. As Americans, and specifically among progressives, we're really bad about following the dominoes of seeing how does domino A knocking down affect B, C, D, E, and F. We often look at here's the problem, here's a simple solution, let's just do it regardless of what other dominoes
and move
follow.
on.
Right. Let's follow the dominoes of what just happens and what you just said. Progressives want to increase corporate tax rates. They want to make businesses the bad guy. Eventually, you make businesses the bad guy enough, people stop creating businesses. There's no reason. Why would I create a business? Why would I take the risk, both the liability risk and the personal risk of what if somebody doesn't like what I'm offering value-wise? You stop creating businesses. You stop creating businesses, you have a flood of people who come into the job market. There's not enough jobs available. People stop working. Those people stop working, they become reliant on the government. Now the progressives say, we want people, I mean, they won't admit this publicly, but the progressive idea is based on we want people who are on the government dole, who are being taken care of by the government. In order to take care of people, the government, who is unproductive, has to have capital to be able to do this. Now, one thing you said last week that was really, really important that I hope everybody took away was in order to accumulate debt, in order to, whether it's printing money or especially getting foreign investment, they have to know, those countries or those other investors have to know that there is an ability for the government to tax people to gain revenue. If nobody's working and everybody's taking from the government, not putting into the government, then foreign countries, foreign entities are no longer going to invest in U.S. bonds and U.S. Treasury. And when they're not going to invest in U.S. Treasury, the government stops having money. They start putting out, even printing more money than they were before, because that's the only way they can put money in.
Now we get runaway inflation.
Right. Now you get runaway inflation and you end up with Russia. You end up with the USSR and you end up with the collapse of an entire economy.
And I want to add one more stage to that. And I'm not one. I don't peddle in conspiracy theories or doomsday, but this is a very real thing that we have seen happen within the last century around the world. Once you have demonized the idea of business and particular business people, and you've demonized the idea of corporations, anyone who's productive, they're the bad guy. They're public enemy number one. And then you have a regime that starts to implode and collapse, and people are going hungry, and people are panicking, and people become violent. Those in government, the progressives in government who've caused all this, they're not going to take responsibility. They're not going to say, whoops, this is all our fault. We shouldn't have tried this experiment in progressive central planning. They're going to look around, who's the easiest scapegoat to point to? Those businesses and corporations they've been demonizing all along.
Right.
It's their fault. This is all their fault. And we've seen this happen in communist regimes. If you're a successful business person, this actually happens. Your face might show up on posters. They're put up all over in public spaces saying, that is public enemy number one. You see that person, shoot him.
But after you shoot that person, eventually people figure it out. And that's what we've seen in Venezuela. And Venezuela is a tale everybody should be aware of because it happened really fast. I mean, it was less than a decade ago. The Heritage Foundation does their economic, what do they call
Index
it?
of Economic Freedom.
Index of Economic Freedom. Venezuela was way up high. They were this strong economic power. They were a free economy. And then all of a sudden, now people are fighting against the army, just trying to get into a restaurant or into a grocery store for a loaf of bread. There might be one on the shelf and 5,000 people trying to get in and get it. So it is a very, very real problem, and it is a very, very real scenario. We should, if anything, as a country, go back to a point where we were in the late 1800s, where business was this unbelievable thing. Innovation, industry. People aren't perfect. Not everybody's good.
It was celebrated.
Right.
It was celebrated. It was held up as a kind of goal, an ideal. Hey, if someone else can run a successful business, maybe I can too. If I work really hard and I'm smart, and I can too. And you're right. People will do nefarious things, and that's why we have tort law. We have all kinds of civil law. We have criminal law if they're purposely trying to hurt people and violate people's rights. There's all kinds of ways to handle that while not punishing. We don't want to punish those who are willing to step out and take some risk and try to be productive. The first corporate tax that was created in 1913, the same year Wilson became president, was 1%. And about a decade later, it had gone up to 15%. It keeps going up throughout World War II in the 1930s and 40s. That corporate income tax rate, or the corporate tax rate, is going up. It peaks in the 1960s around 50%. I mean, think of that. 50% of corporate earnings. This is, I mean, you have all kinds of problems flowing from this. I mean, this is a real low point in American innovation and business expansion, because who wants to invest in any business, whether it's a startup or an established business, when there's a 50% tax rate? And this is one of the things that Reagan comes into office and pushes back against. We get it down under Trump to 21%. And if we were wise today, we would be talking about how to get down into the teens, or even lower. But instead, Joe Biden and his Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are pushing as hard as they can in the other direction.
So if I could leave our audience with one thought, and then we'll wrap up. There are a dozen or so people who have committed to this giving pledge. These multi-billionaires, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, that have said, when I die, 99% of my wealth is going to tax-exempt organizations. If they really believed in what government does, why aren't they giving that money to Congress?
Yeah, great idea.
I mean, if they really believe that Congress can take care of us, they want all these guys elected because they really believe in progressivism. It makes me question, do they really believe in progressivism, or do they believe in cronyism?
I wouldn't mind starting to call them out, publicly challenging them, saying, why don't you, Jeff Bezos, why don't you give all that money to government? I challenge you to do that, because you've been telling us we should support government, that government is the solution to our problems. Then give it all to government and call them out on that.
The sad part is, even if they did that, even if they all gave all their money to government when they die, it still wouldn't come close to covering our national debt.
No, we're close.
Which is really sad that we've gotten to that point.
If you took all the money, all the wealth, all the savings, everything, all the property of all the billionaires in the United States, it would fund just the federal government for about 5 months.
You know what's funny, though? If we posed that question to Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, you know who would jump on the bandwagon with us? Bernie Sanders. He would start asking the very exact same thing. And it's an interesting, it would just prove that they don't really care.
They don't really care.
So
we need somebody who's going to guard the American idea, guard the principles of freedom, guard the idea of economic freedom, of private property, and guard the great human aspiration to be entrepreneurial and productive and creative, that we Americans, we used to be great at this, and we can be great at it again.
Absolutely. Until next time, we will continue to guard those ideas, and I hope all of our listeners will as well. Nos vemos, Custodios.
Yep.